All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Todd Stewart. I'm ASC's Vice President of Public Art. I want to welcome you all to our pre-submittal meeting for the City of Charlotte's Northeast Corridor Infrastructure Program, Public Art Opportunity. I'm joined with my colleague, Randella Foster, ASC's Project Manager for Public Art. And tonight we'll be going over ASC in general, giving you an overview of what we do as an organization and specifically the Public Art Department. And then we'll jump into a project overview specific to the J.W. Clay project for the City of Charlotte. And we'll end tonight by giving you some helpful tips on how to apply for this opportunity and others. So before I begin, I just want to notify everyone that tonight's meeting is being recorded. So although we would like to see all your lovely faces, if you're not comfortable with that for any reason, please feel free to turn your video off, and we completely understand. We'll be using this recording for just educational purposes for people who are probably interested in this information but not able to attend tonight's meeting. So a couple of housekeeping things before we begin. I'm sure most of us are used to Zoom at this point, going 2 years into the pandemic, but if you're not, I'd like to request that everyone please mute your audio until you're ready to speak. This will just allow us to hear everyone clearly when questions are asked or when presenters are presenting. If you have a question, I think the best way for I or Randella to take notice of you is to use the reactions feature, and you can select raise hand and it'll highlight your profile with a raised hand so that we can call on you for a question. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end of tonight's program, and we hope to address those then. If you're worried you're going to forget your question, please feel free to put it into the chat feature by selecting chat and then typing to everyone. That way, Randella and I can take note of that and ask your question later on. Just think of it as a space holder. So first, let me go over the public art program. ASC has been involved in public art project management since 1992 with the City of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. In that time frame, it was a lot of private developers and philanthropic groups raising funds for public art to be donated then to the city or the county, and ASC act as brokers of kind of that whole process. In 2002 and 2003, respectively, Mecklenburg County and the City of Charlotte adopted 1% for art ordinances, and that ordinance appropriates 1% of eligible capital improvement project funds for public art, usually cited in the geographic locations or specific to the projects that the construction funds are coming from, similar to J.W. Clay. ASC, for our role in project management, we oversee the planning, artist selection, contracting, community engagement, and the facilitation of fabrication and installation with the Public Art Commission oversight. And I'll describe that oversight body a little later in the presentation. And I'm proud to say that to date, ASC has accomplished 174 projects. This image you're seeing to the right on the screen is the best example I can give you of kind of how these projects are scattered throughout Mecklenburg County. So county projects are represented by a blue dot, city projects are in red, and from time to time we help private developers, architectural firms, and other private organizations with public art commissions as well, and you'll see those in green. All this was started through a master plan and strategy guide implemented in 2002, and our main objective identified in that plan is that public art serves as a catalyst for connectivity, bonding people to a place and to one another, generating a greater sense of pride and responsibility for places that enhance quality of life and celebrate communities' unique attributes. And the image you're seeing here is Who Do You Say I Am by Beth Nybeck for CMPD University Police Station, one of our recent projects. So the ASC Public Art process and the Public Art Commission. So generally speaking, ASC prefers to release two different types of calls to artists: requests for qualifications, or RFQs, and request for proposals. We prefer requests for qualifications because we believe it gives you a more nuanced opportunity to create something specific to a site and a place in response to the communities you're building it for. We do RFPs when our clients have something very specific in mind, and we can offer the artist who hopefully will apply for the opportunities with an abundance of information in terms of what they're looking at in the beginning. Beyond that, the main difference is with a request for qualifications, artists are coming into the process without much ideation to begin with. Of course, everyone has ideas, everyone has an artistic sensibility that they bring to the table, but it's really through meeting with design consultants, city, county administrators, and the communities we serve that the ideas begin to generate and the artists move forward through the conceptual development. RFPs, we kind of hit the ground running. Artists are selected based on a proposal. The J.W. Clay Boulevard opportunity is an RFQ, so you will be selected or reviewed based on precedent projects from your portfolio, a letter of interest, and a CV, and some other submission requirements. The Public Art Commission is a 9-member community board comprised of 3 appointees from the City of Charlotte, 3 appointees from Mecklenburg County, and 3 appointees from ASC. Their primary role is in artist selection, so every artist selection panel is chaired by a public art commissioner, and then that recommendation by the artist selection panel is brought back to that oversight board to formalize and accept that recommendation as an approval. From there, they are the body that we take every design phase through. So we ask artists to go through concept design, schematic design, and final design, much like the architects are developing the overall architectural project. And the Public Art Commission is there to hear the artist's proposal, provide feedback, and then either approve or disapprove based on the appropriateness of the concepts to the project that we're designing for. Artists are evaluated on the following criteria: originality and creativity of past work, exemplary technical competence and comparable scale of past work, professional qualifications and experience, and consistent quality and production of artwork. Community engagement, or working and dialoguing with communities, is a huge part of each project that ASC does. We actually write it into our contracts, and we interface and work with communities in 3 distinct ways. Community representatives participate on our selection panels, kind of providing some on-the-ground perspective in terms of what the neighborhood's desires are, giving a sense of overall input as community representatives. Artists then dialogue with communities, ensuring that the artwork is created with the community's voice in mind. And from time to time, we can lead artist-facilitated workshops. These can be in person. We've done a number of those virtually throughout the pandemic. Sometimes artists develop surveys to collect input for their project at different design phases. Artists can give presentations, kind of talking about their studio practice or particular to the projects they're designing. And then, of course, artist talks and dedication closer to the end of our projects when more of educational purposes in terms of what the cumulative artwork is. So for further information, I hope you feel free to reach out to myself or Randella. Our contact information is listed here. You can also find out more about ASC in general through our website. And we have some pull downs specifically for the public art program, just to learn more about the ordinance and how those things work, as well as a page specific to our calls to artists. And that is a space where you will see via this link the current opportunities that we have up that are available for artists to apply to, as well as some community RFQs and RFPs that we allow our partnering organizations to place on our website. And as always, I hope you follow us on Facebook and Instagram at ASC Charlotte. This is just for regular news and updates of the good work that ASC is doing in our communities. So now I'm going to turn it over to Randella to go over the specifics of the J.W. Clay project. And Randella, if you would, just let me know when you want to advance slides and I'll push it forward for you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you guys again for joining us this evening to learn more about this public art opportunity. Next slide, Todd. So again, the site for the artwork is the J.W. Clay Boulevard Streetscape. that specifically is North Tryon to W.T. Harris Boulevard. The budget for the project is $132,818. And that budget is to cover all costs associated with the public art project, including the artist design fees, design, engineering, any permitting, any lighting, fabrication, installation, as well as any travel that would be required, administrative fees, insurance, taxes. During your budget development, we also request that you include a 10% contingency just to accommodate any unexpected expenses. That could also include any inflation in the cost of materials from the time you actually present your budget to the time you actually begin fabrication, which can sometimes be a lengthy time. It's very important that,
if I can, Rendell, and I'll also say, make sure you're paying yourself. We usually ask that artists anywhere between 10 and 15% in their budget. Make sure that you're covering an artist fee for your own time working in the project from the outset.
Thanks, Todd. And then also, it's just very important that you manage the budget efficiently, because this is the 1%. There's no additional funding, so you can't come by to us and say, hey, Rendella, mid-project, I'm about $10,000 short. There's nowhere for us to pull funds from. So it's just very important to manage your budget. Project background. So the Northeast Corridor Infrastructure Program, often referred to as NECI, is a collection of projects selected to improve pedestrian, bicyclist, and motorist access to the Lynx Blue Line. This conceptual cross-section includes 4 travel lanes with 4 left turn lanes at the intersections, as well as a 12-foot cycle track, a 10-foot multi-use path, of course, curb and gutter, 8-foot sidewalks, planting strips, and street trees. This project will include connectivity to the Barton Creek Greenway interface with J.W. Clay Boulevard. Barton Creek Greenway will provide a direct link between J.W. Clay Boulevard and Mallard Creek Greenway. Residences within that area access to 9 miles of existing Greenway trail. An overland connector sidewalk along J.W. Clay Boulevard will connect Barton Creek Greenway to the North Tryon Light Rail Station. And next slide. And this is an aerial map provided by the city. As you can see, the J.W. Clay Boulevard is sort of nestled in between I-85 on the left and 29 North Tryon on the right. That specific stretch has numerous retail shops and restaurants, as well as some residential areas. And this is an opportunity here for us to share the 3 potential sites for the artwork. The first opportunity would be sited on J.W. Clay Boulevard, marking the Greenway trailhead near the Walden Court Apartments. Again, that would be artwork that needs to be highly visible. It needs to be engaging as well, but highly visible so that it can provide a layer of wayfinding as well. Like, hey, this is where you get on and off the trail, sort of a landmark, if you will. Option 2 lets you impact both sides of J.W. Clay. The first being near the Walden Court Apartments, and the second one being directly across that. The artwork would be placed in between the planting strips and the sidewalk. Again, still offering that wayfinding as well as engagement. The third option is to create a sequential series of installation to be placed in those plantings between J.W. Clay and North Tryon. Specifically, we're looking for it to be closer to the trailhead area. That way it can also still provide that wayfinding, that wayfinding for, like, this is where you get on and off of the trail. And next slide. So the artwork goals and criteria. This opportunity should achieve a cohesive and unique aesthetic experience that is distinguished from, yet sensitive to the site and the surrounding areas. We want the artwork to look like it belongs there as opposed to just being sort of plopped there. The artwork should be informed by the historical and cultural context of a university city area. This could be concluded by independent research, as well as through the community engagement session that Todd referenced earlier. The artwork should contribute to the overall streetscape project to create a unified and striking visual experience for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, and vehicular traffic. That's a lot, right? But the artwork needs to be engaging up close as well as from a distance. The artwork must adhere to all safety standards required by the Charlotte Department of Transportation. And the artwork should be constructed of durable materials and permanent in nature. So durable materials would be materials such as aluminum, stainless steel, Corten steel, stone, granite. These should also require little to no maintenance. And permanent in nature, meaning it needs to last at least 20 years. The anticipated artwork installation is for the fall, winter of 2024. And next slide. And so these are just a couple images that were also shared in the RFQ of current site conditions near where that trailhead marker area will be at Walden Court Apartments. And next slide. And this is from the perspective of if you were standing on the side of J.W. Clay near the Walden Court Apartments and looking across J.W. Clay toward the ever popular lake in that area. And that concludes the project overview.
All right, thank you, Rendella. So now I'd like to briefly go over some of the submission requirements and describe some best practices for applying for commissions. And I'll say that these are specific to ASC and many of the RFQs and RFPs we release, but they're probably also applied to various calls to artists that you'll find from other organizations or private groups as well. So first up is like a letter of interest or video, and that is an either or, whichever you're most comfortable kind of describing yourself and your process through. We ask that a letter of interest be concise, no more than 1 page in length, and videos similarly concise and 2 minutes in length. We're hoping that you will express your interest in the project, what's essential to you as an artist in terms of your own research, aesthetic development, what is it that related to your practice as an artist that you are really driven to apply to this opportunity for? Mention any relevant experience you have that is similar to the public art opportunity described in the RFQ. I can't stress that enough. There's a number of artists that public art is very much a career for them, and that's awesome. But time and time again, we run across kind of a boilerplate letter of interest that really doesn't speak to the opportunity or the RFQ at hand at all. I've actually seen letters of interest that have the project listed wrongly of, some project in California or whatever, applying for a North Carolina opportunity. So the devil's in the details, and just make sure that it's a good way of showing that you've read the RFQ, that you're at least aware of what you're applying for, and a way of tying you in closer to why you're the right artist for the specific opportunity. Discuss your process for conceptual development, designing, and fabricating your work in general. So we put that in general in parentheses there because we don't want you to begin saying, this is what I'm going to do for this project. It's more, as an artist, this is how I tend to approach concept development or the design phases of my projects. If fabricating your work personally is very important to you and you have a history of doing so, describe that here. If you have a history of working with fabricators to realize your designs, that's just as relevant, and we hope that you'll describe it in the letter of interest. Is your work typically site-specific? Provide examples of how so. Are you comfortable involving communities in your artistic practice? And then, make sure you provide examples of how you've done that, strategies that you employ for doing so. It's perfectly all right if you're not. Plenty of artists aren't, and or maybe it's new to you. I think it would still be good to talk a little bit about like an overall strategy or an interest that you have in possibly working with communities for an ASC project. Indicate ways a viewer may experience your work up close and from a distance. That doesn't have to be something you go into length about. It's just good to think of how your artwork can pertain to multiple perspectives, both visual and conceptual. And then close with why you think you would be the best artist for this commission. And I would say that that's honestly a good opening and closing, just to identify that, you know, you're super excited about the opportunity and this is why. And based on your experience, you feel you're the best artist for commission. This is why, as kind of a closing paragraph. As an example, one of our artists that we recently completed a project with us for the City of Charlotte's 5 Points Plaza project, Stacy Utley. He's also an educator, and many thanks to him for providing these examples and letting us use them as educational tools. So you can see here, I'll give you the cliff notes. Stacy really breaks it down for this. He was a part of a 3-part artist team, himself, David Wilson, and Edwin Harris, who is the principal and founder of Evoke Architectural Studios. So, you know, Stacy is local here to Charlotte, talking about how he is a local artist, has experience working with the communities that we were trying to connect with and work with in dialogue for 5 Points Plaza already. So describing his history of that. You know, numerous times he lists how it would be an honor to serve the community, and, you know, sees this project as a labor of love. He starts to go into his approach in terms of creating something that would be bold and striking and eye-catching, you know, getting into that visual perspective, and then begins to point out certain key features that he sees in the site already that he would be interested in researching more on and possibly involving in his artwork concept development. Listing his background, his in art and architecture and urban design and wayfinding was a big plus for this project in particular. And he kind of ties it in with the goals that we addressed in the RFQ for 5 Points Plaza. I think something he very smartly did here at the end was he actually gave a bulleted list of other projects that he and Edwin had completed that achieved similar goals to the ones we outlined in the RFQ. And then just kind of furthering hammering it home by talking about his community engagement methods, methodology, and ways that he's excited about using that in this project, or the project he was eventually commissioned for. So similar to the letter of interest, we would like to provide options. So as part of your submissions, we require that you either submit a CV or resume or a biography. How ASC distincts those two, the resume should include all art-related work experiences, kind of like what you're seeing here on the left, just as kind of a running list, annotate list, talking about your education, professional affiliations, academic achievements, exhibitions you've had, places you've been published, public commissions you've been awarded, things of that nature. A biography can consist of art-related work experience that you want to highlight. So that is more in terms of describing yourself as an artist, more in a prose form, and really highlighting the aspects of your professional practice that you're most excited about. So portfolio images. I would say that our images that you're submitting are probably the most important component of your application for public artwork. This is where you show what you have achieved, what you're most proud of. Images should be high quality, both in kind of like resolution, you know, 300 DPI images, and also, you know, just really well documented projects. One thing that we ask artists to kind of shy away from or be careful of using too much are what we call composite images. And that's the image that you see on the left. This artist team is an incredible team with a long history of public art projects, and they've applied for a number of our opportunities. And the feedback we get from artist selection panels time and time again is they're not quite sure what they're looking at. And to some of it, I can get why the artist did it. Explaining sculpture visually, and especially these projects. So what you're looking at is a gateway piece of mosaic tiled, and On the sidewalk leading through this gateway, they also inserted a number of tiles in the flat face of the sidewalk service. So they were trying to, in one image, because you're only given like 8 to 10, go for broke and really try to show you all that they did in this one specific project. It ends up being confusing. A number of panelists were really confused as to like what the surrounding border was. And my advice in a situation would be like, with that would be to sacrifice, a few of your other images to show details and just describe it and list it accordingly that this is a detail of said project. It just gives you a much clearer example and understanding to the artist selection panels as to what you're trying to achieve. So not that, I think what this project has done in particular is one very clear high resolution photo, very well composed. I especially appreciate that they included figures, people standing in front of it to give a sense of scale that is instantly recognizable, not something that you have to look further into the description box to actually account for height, width, depth, things like that. You can get an immediate reference of how it relates to the human figure in the space around it. Image annotations, so these should include the title of the work, the date and location, a brief project description, media and dimensions, budget, and a commissioning agent or client. And there's an example of that below, much like you would cite works in a bibliography or something of that nature, just kind of listing the important info for the images that you've provided in your submission or application. And then references. References for the finalists. So we usually select 3 to 5 finalists for each opportunity. And we do regularly check your references just to hear about your working relationships and your successes with past projects. And this is a breakdown of kind of the info that we look for that. The name of the reference, their organization, the position they held while you worked with them, a mailing address, phone, email. Phone and email are the most important. And then briefly describe a relationship that you have with them. In what capacity did you work with them in the past, or how did they know you? I would say it's as a best practice, and as a courtesy, it's good to reach out to your references or your potential references beforehand and request, for every opportunity. Or if you want to just kind of, cover it for multiple, just say, really enjoyed working with you. Would you mind if I used you as a reference in future applications? And more than likely they will say yes. All right. And thus concludes the information we have to share tonight, but we are more than happy to answer any questions, and I will back up any slides to talk either about the project overview or the submission tips that we've provided. And at this point, don't feel like you got to use the reaction thing and raise your hand. Feel free to take the time just to kind of like shout out, scream, "Hey Todd, I got a question." I'll do my best to look at you and answer it. Rendella, anything additional you want to add to it while people are thinking, or anything you possibly missed? I didn't quite cover.
I will say, yeah, even if you don't have a question like immediately, if you think of something later, don't hesitate to reach out. If it's related to ASC or the project, great. If it's related to technical support and slide room not working for you, please use that link in the RFQ to reach out for technical support for slide room. I will say, we're working, everybody's online these days. I just can't stress enough not waiting until Monday the 29th to apply, because you're going to start emailing me and I'm not going to see your email until Tuesday after the deadline, and we're not able to extend the deadline. So yeah, just can't stress that enough.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rendella. And often when I get a question like that, it's kind of out of my skill set anyway, as to I'm just as lost as you are in terms of helping with slide room. So it's best to go to the experts. I did see a question in the chat. Does the $132,000 budget apply to all 3 sites? So these sites are the options that ASC has identified for the scope of the project. We're not expecting the 132,000 to cover all three. I actually think that it probably could not to get the impact we want. But in a situation like this, we like to apply options to the opportunity that the artist can then come in and kind of work with us to really narrow in what they're most excited about. So think of it as doing one sculpture on either side of JW Clay, say in here for options 1 or 2. Maybe you scale them down a bit in terms of how you want to approach it, and it becomes much more of a gateway structure in terms of being able to pass through 2 sculptures. And the third option we provided would be a series of much smaller opportunities that are kind of sequential in nature, running along that median of JW Clay. But no, I don't expect anyone to be able to cover all 3 sites with that budget. I will also say these are the options we've identified now. Once we start to work with the design consultants and the city team and the community and other stakeholders, often other things arise and the artists could equally get interested in that. And ASC, in terms of our project management, we're here as partners with the selected artists that we work with, and we would be willing to consider that. We've had that happen numerous times where things come up that, you know, artists identify something much more creative than we could have come up with in the beginning. All right. Is there a priority location? Not necessarily. I think for me, and I try to get my own personal thoughts out of it because really it's what the community and the stakeholders are looking for. But most of the conversation is revolved around site number 1. Mainly because that's the trailhead for the Barton Creek Greenway. So we've had conversations not only with the City of Charlotte staff, but with Mecklenburg County Parks and Rec and their staff as well, in terms of how this artwork could exist as wayfinding to really pinpoint and tell people that there is a greenway system within reach if they're traveling down JW Clay Boulevard. So, you know, making it something really recognizable, something that you want to stop at, a landmark that you can say, meet me or turn at the thing, the sculpture. So I would say that in terms of that site number 1, there's a pretty steep slope that's not really recognizable from this aerial photo. So I think with options 1 and 2, we're going for something more vertical, more like slender and tall in terms of like, you know, something with a really wide footprint just because of the site restraints for that. Just checking the chat to make sure there's no other questions. But yeah. Okay, cool.
I have a question.
Yes.
Now, in the I read that groups can, like, people can come together with other artists to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the same requirements, same resume?
It is. So how we ask artists to do that is for one artist within the team to take the role of lead artist, and you would be the artist applying for that opportunity. And you could consider your collaborators almost as subcontractors of sorts. That sounds more sleazy than it is. I'm not saying you have to define your relationship in those terms, but for application purposes, and then eventually if you're selected for contracting purposes, you need to contract with one artist unless you're like a full-fledged business like corporation or LLC or something that has multiple people in it. We can also do that. But just for ease of purposes, let me advance to some of the application requirements. Yeah, we asked that much like Stacy did. So he applied as a team. So that was one letter of interest in terms of like what they were all interested in and their shared goals and their shared methodologies. For the CV or resume or biography, you know, if you were going to do a biography, I think it could be a joint one of however many collaborators you're working with. For this one in particular, Stacy had broken it up into like a resume for each of his collaborators. So there were like 3 separate resumes. And then of course, for portfolio images, the one caveat to that, if you're working in a group, unless you have a working history of like collaborating together on previous projects that you kind of did as a group, sometimes artists will mix. So it's kind of like, here's 2 of my artworks, 2 of one of my collaborators' artworks, 2 of the other. It would just be good to identify whose are whose, just for clarity for the artist selection panel. And then that can be.
And I would say,
go ahead.
And I would say if you do have a history of working with them on previous projects, indicate that in your letter or video of interest, because sometimes panels will get worried, like, have they worked with him before? Is that going to work out? It just alleviates some of the speculation about how that working relationship might actually pan out.
Exactly. That's a great addition.
And then if you wanted to include the other artists, like background, like their experience, their murals, okay.
Yeah, I think including other artists and their backgrounds, you can do that through the CV, talk a little bit about in a joint biography, and then your imagery would cover that as well. If you don't have a working relationship previously on projects, it's as simple as just properly citing like whose work is whose in the description for each image.
Okay, so are videos biographies allowed, or just want like a paragraph about everyone?
Can you repeat the question? So
so the question is, you said a joint biography about everyone who's doing it. That's not a video, just want like a paper.
Yeah, so the way we've split it up is like you can do a letter of interest or a video. And that means basically like instead of writing your letter of interest, just do a video of like what you're interested in about the project, kind of covering the same criteria. It's just in one, it's visual and auditory in terms of you know, recording a video of it. The other is you typing it out. When it comes to your CV or biography, I think it's a similar either or. If you want to do a CV or resume for each artist, or I would say do a joint biography where you kind of talk about each other or your working relationship as a collaboration.
I would also say, if possible, do a joint video if you choose to do a video, because that's going to actually count as an attachment for media, that video, and that will reduce the number of images that you can submit.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. All right.
Well, I have one more question.
Yes.
How come it's pushed out so far, like years?
So that actually, that's a good question. That coincides with the City of Charlotte's schedule. So we actually, there is ongoing construction. The construction for the streetscape project itself has not begun yet. And the artwork will have to coincide with a timing within that overall construction schedule that makes sense. We don't want to get it in too soon, and then the contractor who's doing the work on the streetscape potentially come in and damage it. They don't want us to do that either, because it makes them liable for the artwork while it's up. But we also are kind of beholden to their schedule. We don't want to come in too late and either you know, impede their progress or deliver something that's well past like the opening of the streetscape itself. So it really all hinges on the City of Charlotte's project. Now, that's to our advantage in some. What we didn't go over a lot here today is like, if you are selected for the commission, our process is multi-phased, in which we ask our artists to develop concepts. Those concepts are approved by the Public Art Commission and the stakeholder or client. Then we go to schematic design, which is basically more like the nuts and bolts, how you're going to implement your concept. And then final design, which is all engineering documents, you know, final budget, final estimates for schedule for fabrication and installation, things of that nature. So there's a lot to get through before we get to the making of the artwork, just in terms of approvals and things like that. So having that construction time and that overall, you know, year or more to work with is actually to our benefit, just in terms of making sure we jump through all the appropriate hoops.
Yeah, there's at least like 2 to 3 months or more sometimes in between those design phases that you present to the Public Art Commission. And then once your final design is approved, you also have to have time to have the artwork fabricated. So it's really not a lot of time when we're talking about 2024 and actually going through the artist selection process, going through the contracting, community engagement. We have to give you time to work through your processes and come up with those design ideas. And hopefully they will all be approved when you present them to the PAC or to the stakeholder, because they also have to approve the artwork. But if they don't, then you have to go back to the drawing board to tweak some things to get that approval. So that time is worked in there. We try and get you on as soon as possible to give you every advantage to create the most impactful artwork for the project.
And I'll just add to that, whoever's awarded this project, this commission, is pretty lucky, because Rendell is an amazing project manager. And we're here. It's not like, you know, we just kind of like leave the artists to just do all the work. And it's like, okay, you've signed the contract, now go do it all. But we're there with you like every step of the way, just to make sure like we can help you facilitate meetings, schedule things, figure out, you know, different phases of design approvals, answer questions for you, and really be the conduit for you to the project team and the stakeholders in the community. So it's really a partnership in that way.
Okay, thank you.
All right. 6:42. If there's no other questions, we'll adjourn tonight's meeting. And as Rendella said earlier, please feel free to reach out to me either by email or phone, or Rendella as well. It can be questions about this project in particular, about ASC in general, or even just other things, you know, related to public art. ASC considers itself a resource for our local creative community. And personally, I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up either for this project or others.
I have one question, if possible.
Yeah.
I don't feel like this project is going to be something that I'd be interested in, but would like to share this information with another artist.
Yeah.
I direct them to the ASC site, call to artists, have them look at.
That's correct. Yeah, you'll find the RFQ under our call to artist page under our website.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
No problem. Thank you for sharing it. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions, I just want to say thanks everyone for spending your evening with us and learning a little bit more about the program and this project in particular. And have a good night. Hope to see you all in applications. All right.
Thank you.